Hello, I'm your host Jim McLean. Welcome back to another episode of the Banterflix Movie Review Show. Let's see what movies we'll be talking about tonight. We'll be reviewing Back to the Future, which is back on the big screen to celebrate its 40th anniversary. I'll be chatting with Floriane Andersen, one of the producers of Julie Pacino's directorial debut, I Live Here Now, which recently screened in Belfast. Our pick of the streams is the documentary John Candy, I Like Me, available now on Amazon Prime. And we'll wrap up with our DVD of the week, John Carpenter's Darkstar, ahead of its re-release later this month. So that's what we've lined up for you this week. Joining me in the studio is the lovely Jim McMorrow.
Hi, Jim.
And Banterflix's very own Joe McElroy.
How you doing, Jim?
Hello to you both. Gentlemen, we have a packed show, so let's crack straight on and get stuck into some movie news.
This is it.
Can't believe we're staying at the Psycho Killer B&B.
Oh, that's so cool. It's a motion detector.
So that's a look at the trailer for Scream 7, dropped over Halloween. We're going to see this being released next year. Kevin Williamson is stepping into the director's chair, also involved in the screenplay. Jim, we know you are a horror fan. We all like horror here. But are you excited for this Scream 7? It kind of seems like we haven't had a lot for a while, and now we have our trailer. And yes, there's a lot of stuff off screen. Some of the new cast members have left, and we have older cast members coming back. Has this trailer grabbed you? Sydney's back?
Not particularly, if I'm honest with you. I think that it's what Spyglass did to Melissa Barrera was very morally bankrupt. What they'd done previously to Neve Campbell, not paying to bring her back and saying we don't need her, and then building a franchise around Melissa Barrera only to dismiss her for such a ridiculous reason, and then all of a sudden say, oh, actually, we do need Neve Campbell back, here's a bucket load of money. It just screams that this for what it is. It's kind of a cash grab, and it's the first time I've seen a Scream movie that's not advancing the story for me. It just feels like an installment, so I'm not particularly interested.
Joe, Jim's not that fussed. The other Jim, me, I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm not fussed, but I'm still going to go see it. It's Ghostface, it's Gale Weathers is back, Sydney's back, why not? And we have a lot of cast members apparently coming back. We just don't know in what guise, whether it be supernatural or... we don't know. But what about you? Are you excited for this?
I'm with First Jim here. No, I'm not particularly excited about it, for the reasons Jim said, first and foremost. But I thought, right, well, what's it actually going to look like? How's this going to play out as a 7th entry in the series? And it just looks like it's spinning its wheels. It's like a repetition, like, oh, Sydney's in trouble again. It's like, no, I've seen that about 4 or 5 times already. He's, same old. And no, I'm done. I'm kind of done with Scream. Like, it's put it this way, I wouldn't want to go to the cinema to see it. I'd maybe, out of curiosity, watch it in streaming someday.
Look, we're going to have to wait and see. It could be the best installment in the franchise. We just don't know. I doubt it, but it could well be. But that's something that's out in cinemas next year. Let's look at something that's back on the big screen.
I'm from the future. I came here in a time machine that you invented. Right, Scott! 1.21 gigawatts! What the hell is a gigawatt? And fly. Hello? Anybody home? You're George McFly. Who are you? Dad!
Just relax, Calvin. You got a big bruise on your head. Well, that is your name, isn't it? Calvin Klein? It's written all over your underwear.
We're sending you back to the future.
Great Scott! Back to the Future. I just want to say great Scott, because Back to the Future is 40 years old. That makes me feel very, very old. Joe, delighted to see this back. Robert Zemeckis, Steven Spielberg, you know, Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, who was recently here at the NI Comic Con. You excited to get a chance to see this again on the big screen, or have you ever seen it on the big screen before?
Well, I actually have seen it on the big screen before. I think it was the 35th anniversary. So now I'm starting to feel a bit older when we're approaching the 40th one. And it really is more or less like the perfect film. You know, it's got literally the perfect screenplay in terms of how you structure like a ridiculous idea when you think about it, and just make it believable, make characters that you can really invest in, and memorable dialogue, and like you've just quoted it there coming into with your intro, great Scott. And it's that, and the manner in which Zemeckis takes you through this story, even through the more ridiculous elements, you just buy into it because you just love everything about the universe that he creates. And then as well as that, you've Alan Silvestri's score, because that's the thing when I rewatched it coming in this, that's the thing that really stuck with me. I just pay particular attention to that because, you know, watched it countless times, be it on TV, and then, like you said, I've seen it in the cinema. And it's just astonishing, like, why we don't get more films like that now. You know, when you just take the basic principles of writing a great script, and then everything can come from, you know, branch out from that, and you can make something truly memorable rather than rehashing stuff from that era.
Yeah, it's a film that is without a doubt a lot of fun. And you look at it now as an adult, I know I have rose-tinted glasses, and like everything, it's like when we talk about Ghostbusters, if you were to show it to someone who'd never seen the film before, they go, yeah, it's a lot of fun, but there is problems. I mean, undoubtedly there is things when you look at it, and kind of certain characters like Biff, you know, there is problems, I guess, more so in the part 2 and part 3, but it's still a film I love, and possibly the Belfast connection with the DeLorean. When I was younger and naive, probably still naive, I did think that the DeLorean was the epitome of cool, and then I did try to get into one at the museum at Cultraw, and I was like, oh, this is not built for someone of my ample frame. But yeah, you've mentioned Alan Silvestri, and that the little chimes that we get, that chime score, is just something that's ingrained in my head. And I think there's a nod to in Ready Player One. It pops up and you just realise just what a great score, what a fun film it is. It's something, it's the cheesy thing. There's something in there for everybody. You've got great performances. Michael J. Fox, who of course was not the first choice for the role, or well, was the first choice but wasn't available and then made himself available. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. Get to see it on a big screen with a really good sound system. What's not to like? What better way of spending an evening, afternoon than watching Back to the Future on the big screen? Jim, you weren't too fussed on Scream 7. You weren't too fussed about that idea. So hopefully watching Back to the Future has cheered you up.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's funny. I think in a weird way, I almost forget how incredibly iconic and beautiful and wonderful Back to the Future is, because it's not one that I revisit, you know, on an annual basis in the way that I do like films like The Goonies and, you know, other films of that era. And in a weird way, I kind of think it's almost transcended the medium of film, because it's so iconic and it's so wonderful. You know, I love Alan Silvestri's scores. We've said I love Dean Cundy's photography. You know, it's absolutely amazing. I love the script, and I think, you know, Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox, you know, Crispin Glover, all those characters are so perfectly played, and it's just like this big melting pot of a film that's everything it should be. And it's like a warm blanket, and we're coming into the festive season. I almost feel like this is a Christmas movie, because it's just one of those films that, you know, you can just watch forever as a family or on your own, and just never cease to be enjoyed by it. So it was wonderful to see it again, and to, you know, I have never seen it on the big screen, so I'm really excited about the prospect of seeing it on a giant screen.
Well, now you have the opportunity, and I would say, I think my roundabout answer of getting round that, we always talk about this, Christmas movies. There's Christmas movies and there's festive favourites. It's like The Sound of Music. There's nothing about Nazis that really involves Christmas, but yet we find ourselves watching that film around the festive season, so it's a festive favourite. But before we get into December and into that debate, Die Hard is of course a Christmas movie. But look, of course the Belfast Film Festival is ongoing. Lucy Liu was in the city last week, but We had our very own festival, the Belfast International Horror Festival, and one of those films that screened was Julie Pacino's directorial debut, I Live Here Now, and I got a chance to speak to the film's producer, Floriane Andersen. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me here in Belfast, and I'm one of the programmers for our festival, and our theme for the year was female rage, and Julie's film really stayed with me, and that's why we wanted to program it as part of the festival. Now, you and I are talking about this, like we have a lot of knowledge about what the film's about. How would you describe this feature?
Ooh, actually, female rage is such a good word for it, because there is a lot of anger, but it's also about finding your inner peace within you and not the outside validation in order to heal. So the rage has been inside her for so long. The main character is living with rage and anger, and by going within herself, she'll find the keys for her healing journey.
How did you get involved on this project as a producer?
As a producer, well, I've been working with Julie for the past 5 years, various different roles. I helped with editing. I went to sets with her, like being the first AD and helping find crews and stuff. So I've been involved in the creative process of Julie's journey for a while. And initially we were helping as friends because we were really championing the film, but we were not involved from the get-go. And as things kind of evolved and the shoot went to the UK to be shot, I was able to use my connections because I lived in London for a few years, and so I started to help with the team building, and at the post-production level, we decided that Artac Pictures would make sense in terms of investment, but also creative input with post-production editing and festival marketing, because Artac Pictures is a European/US production company, and we have ties in both countries, so we have a good understanding of how the European market and especially the festival circuit works. So we were able to help them.
Can you say at this stage what we can expect beyond the festival circuit? We have a glut now of online streamers that are available through various regions. I guess that makes it both. It's never been easier to get your art out there, or content, although I hate to use that term, but I guess it's also never been more challenging because there are so many platforms out there.
Of course. Well, we are lucky enough to have a theatrical release in early first quarter of 2026, and it's really important for Julie to have the film screen on a big screen. It was shot in 35. It's a gorgeous film that needs to be seen on the big screen. So they are really adamant on giving a chance to the film to shine in that medium and to find its audience this way. And so depending on how well the film is doing, maybe a wider release and then streaming platform. But we're really focusing on theatrical right now because we think it's the right medium for this particular story. It really depends on films. We are lucky enough to have an amazing distributor. Utopia was from the beginning really insisting on having this film on a print and releasing it. So I think it is a challenge, but it's also what makes the film stand out. And in a sea of big blockbusters, we might need some independent movies that are different. And so I hope the film will shine in that way.
Floriane, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to myself. And again, congratulations on the film's success here in Belfast at the Belfast International Horror Festival.
very much.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
So that's my interview with Floriane Andersen as the City Films on its festival circuit. We're delighted to screen it. Of course, it picked up an award. We shamelessly mentioned that during the interview. Jim, you haven't seen this, but Joe, you did get to watch it during the festival. It was one of those films that I find, and I saw this at Edinburgh, I think I said in my rambly introduction on the night, that it stayed with me, and we had the theme of female rage, and I know we discussed that briefly with Floriane, but you know, it's been a few days since you've watched it. Have you had time to mull over the film? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I didn't know what to expect going into it. You know, just what you sort of told me from what you got from it in Edinburgh. And I was like, it does sound intriguing, the premise, and you know how it explores that theme of female rage. But watching it, I was like, for like a debut film, it looked beautiful, and I love the surreal element to it. It doesn't always work, mind you, but when it does work, it works quite well. And I think you said it was quite Lynchian in its approach, and you definitely do see those influences of David Lynch in it. But for a debut film, it's a damn solid effort, and I'd be interested to see, you know, what Julie does next.
Yeah, definitely. And Julie, if you're watching, would happily, you know, next time, not just a video introduction, we'll have you here in the city. Jim, you haven't seen this, but I think we will move on. And we're talking about films that are on the big screen, on the festival circuit. I think we shall talk about something we can watch from the comfort of our own home.
He was so gentlemanly and so Canadian.
Nobody had bigger expectations for himself than John.
And then all of a sudden, it kind of jumped to a different level.
I'd made winning my whole life. And when you make winning your whole life, you have to keep on winning.
You've been in more turkeys than a stuffing mix.
I think the weight of everything he was doing was just too much.
A hazard of this business is that it's very unhealthy for people pleasers.
You can't really do favors for people.
It's a bottomless cup of coffee. If you go a whole lifetime eating your feelings, drinking your feelings, smoking your nerves, it shows up.
You know, there's some things that are just painful. That's it. And you can't make them not painful.
Hollywood still reacting to the shocking news.
John Candy is dead at the age of 43.
But it's the face you put on the world that defines who you are.
So that's a look at the trailer for John Candy, I Like Me. This is Colin Hanks' latest documentary. I know that he's done a few, very much Ryan Reynolds, baby. He has championed this. He's a producer on the project. I have been wanting to watch this for quite some time. I grew up in very much a John Candy loving house. My father was someone who absolutely adored Uncle Buck. So yes, I've been looking forward to watching this. Joe, you did message me and say you were a bit worried about this film because you didn't want to be sad. And I don't think there is elements of sadness in this, but I think this documentary is a real love letter to someone who just feels like he's one of cinema's good guys.
Yeah, and he definitely was. Like, even aside from the documentary, like, it touches upon this in the documentary, and like, you just see John Candy, and you just feel the goodness and the kindness emanate from, you know, his face. And I told you I was worried, you know, about watching and crying. I did cry, but it was almost like tears of happiness. I was like, what a wonderful human being he is, was. And just watching it, you know, it did bring back all those memories of watching those films, like you mentioned, Uncle Buck, Cool Runnings, Home Alone, even when he pops up in that, it's fantastic. But the way it explores, you know, the man himself and, you know, the struggles that he went through, and despite those struggles, it didn't affect him being such a nice and kind person to everyone. Like, one of my favourite parts was when Conan O'Brien was being interviewed, and John Candy went to visit his high school class, and he just was very generous with his time. He was so nice to everyone, spoke to everyone, took pictures of, you know, the whole event, and was just really happy to be there. And you could tell, even though like there was no footage of him there, you could tell he genuinely loved being there and loved, you know, being around the people there. But for the documentary itself, it's really impressive, the various talking heads that they have. There's like you mentioned Colin Hanks, his father Tom is there. There's Martin Short, Bill Murray, everyone who was sort of close to John himself, and they had nothing but kind words to speak about him. And that may be a fault to some when it comes to a documentary, but it's hard to find the fault with it. I mean, when they tried to bring up some of his flaws, but that didn't really affect your overall impression of the man. You just got the best version of him, and that's who he was. He was the best version of himself in a sense.
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, I think even Bill Murray makes a joke about it. I think it's very, very early on within the documentary. It's an impressive ensemble of talking heads, and maybe that's, I guess, a testament to John Candy in the sense that people want to talk about him, and you can see Ryan Reynolds, etc., who's as I say, the producer on this project, one of the producers. They've really wanted to champion him, and they've put him on a pedestal, and it doesn't disappoint. If someone had very little interest in John Candy's films, I don't know if there'd be much there for them, but I would still recommend it in the sense of just, be a good person, I guess, in that sense. But Jim, I mean, as I said, I hadn't asked you, are you a big John Candy fan?
Who isn't? It's kind of funny. I was actually thinking about this in preparation for the episode. There are certain actors and there's certain films and there's certain directors and so forth that make, you can pinpoint, oh, that's when I became aware of that actor or creative role, whatever. John Candy's just one of those ones who you can't really pinpoint the exact moment. He's just always been in our lives. And, Joe and I were talking down the stairs. He seems to have had a career that lasted 100 years, but it was actually a really brief snapshot of time. And I think it's testament to the amazing performances that he, comes in Home Alone and completely steals the show. He's amazing in Uncle Buck. He's even amazing in dramatic roles like JFK and so forth, which you wouldn't necessarily think of him in that way. And so we know he's an amazing screen presence, and I kind of love that the documentary took us behind that and said, now this is the person behind your favourite movies. And when it got to the end and we were kind of dealing with his death and his legacy and so forth, I definitely shed more than a few tears. I thought it was a really beautiful tribute to what seemed like a really beautiful man, and it was just lovely to have that insight.
I think that's a lovely note to wrap up our discussion, particularly in this part of the show, on that documentary. And let's move on and wrap up this week's show with a bit of physical media.
Benson, Arizona, the same stars in the sky, but they seem so much kinder when we watch them, you and I.
So that's a look at Darkstar. It's getting re-released later this month with a lovely new 4K restoration, John Carpenter's directorial debut, often dubbed a bit of a test run for Alien. Jim, I know, as I said, you're a horror fan, you are a John Carpenter fan, so you're gonna have to hold your horses for just a moment. Joe, are you a fan of Darkstar? Had you watched this before we'd ask you to review it for the show?
Yeah, I'd seen it quite a few years ago. It was when I actually first got into John Carpenter. Funny enough, the first film of his I saw was Assault on Precinct 13. I just remember reading the DVD cover. It's like, oh, it's such a cool premise. Took it home, watched it 3 times in a row, loved it that much. And then from there, I went through the likes of Escape from New York, The Thing, Halloween. But then, when you're younger, you look at IMDb lists, you're like, oh, what else have they done? And I've seen Darkstar, what's this? And then just out of curiosity, I think it was in film 4 or something like that. I put it on and I was like, this is really strange. Like a beach ball alien, and these sort of crude sets and that there. And at the time, I didn't really appreciate it for what it was, but rewatching it for the show, I was like, now I get what he was going for. I know essentially it's a student film that's padded out a bit to make it feature length, but at the same time, I appreciate the charms. And you mentioned how it was like a sort of a practice run in the sense for Dan O'Bannon when he came to Alien, who wrote the Darkstar. You do get a lot of that blue collar elements running through the film. And I know the special effects are quite silly, but that's the charm of it at the same time. And then you have John Carpenter's score. You can see how him as a composer was developing, you know, with the basic elements of the synth score within it. And then even as a director, you can see, okay, I can see parts of his characteristics that would make him, you know, that would show his like trademark sort of elements as a filmmaker. You can see elements of that within Darkstar, and you can see how he would progress into Assault on Precinct 13, Halloween, so on and so forth. And this time, I came to appreciate it more. I can see the faults. The faults are clear and they're to see, but I enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to put it. It's not my favourite John Carpenter film. There's things I can sit back and admire and appreciate. You've mentioned the score is one thing in particular, but it's the idea of when, and I know Brian Mulholland with Film Devar, the Short Film Festival always talks about that. You're looking at filmmakers on their journey, and we're looking at it in a kind of reverse way. We're coming to this from maybe, as you mentioned, Assault on Precinct 13, or maybe Halloween, or The Thing, other way. But for John Carpenter, this was his first feature. It's, you know, no pun intended, it is at times out there and weird and wonderful, but it's John Carpenter, so why not? Jim, I get a sense I'm just going to be able to kind of put my feet up now and go, John Carpenter, Darkstar, Jim McMorrow, discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I love Darkstar. I came to it, interesting enough, as you said, Joe, through the music, because my mum had bought me a compilation album of Carpenter scores when I was younger, and I loved the score so much. And I kind of I came to it in a bit of a roundabout way, because I knew all about the production, about how it started as a student thesis that was expanded into a feature film. So I guess maybe that prepared me a little bit for the sort of low-key special effects and stuff in it. And I think I love the counterculture element to it. I love, you know, I'm not a huge fan of 2001, so anything that kind of takes a riff in that is pretty good. I love the humor. I love, you know, the enthusiastic bombs that are about to go off and so forth. I think there's a lot of merit in the film. I know Dan O'Bannon famously described it as, instead of it being the world's best student film, they got the least best professional film. I think that's a bit undervaluing the film for what it is. I think it's a really great film, and it deserves to be seen by, as you say, up-and-coming students, to see what you can do with an ice tray.
Yeah, and with a very limited budget. And yeah, you mentioned, isn't the nods to 2001 are there, the nods to Dr. Strangelove are there. It's a film, I as I say, it's not my favourite John Carpenter film, but it's, if you want to get out there and look through his entire back catalogue, yes, there's Halloween, yes, there's The Thing, yes, there's many entries within John Carpenter's back catalogue. But yeah, why not seek it out on DVD or Blu-ray and see where it all began. And that's John Carpenter's beginning. This is us coming to an end on this week's show. So all that's really left for me to do now is thank my two guests. So thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks very much for watching at home. We'll be back next week with another episode. But for now, until then, goodbye.